Hello there. The underlying theme to this story is the difference in attitude towards bureaucracy between the Portuguese and the English mentality. Okay? The story is called A Young Couple Flanked by Kids. As a Mitsubishi lorry trundled along the roads of central Spain towards the Portuguese border, in the days before Spain and Portugal were in the European Union, Brian Worthington became more and more apprehensive. He and his Portuguese wife Paula had embarked on this adventure without really thinking of the consequence. They had both given up their jobs, solid jobs and very well paid, for a risky escapade in Portugal, where they were going to live with Paula's parents while they prepared for the work that they assumed would come flooding in, along with the money to keep them in clover. Brian stuck his head out of the window to wave at his wife, who was in a Mini in front of the lorry with their two children, aged 9 and 5. They drove up to the border and showed their passports on the Spanish side. It was only a few seconds before they were at the booth on the Portuguese side. The officer looked at their passports and said, "You can't take this lorry into Portugal. You need an import license." They waited. "You have to check the goods through customs, go and see the officer on duty, then come back for your passports to be stamped. Leave the lorry over there." He pointed to an open lorry and car park on the Portuguese side of the border. The Mini was already there. Brian drove into the park and jumped out of the lorry. He went over to his wife. "We're in Portugal." His wife looked at him. "So?" she said. "Well, the passport guy said we couldn't take the lorry into Portugal because we don't have an import license for it. And then he let us drive it in." His wife said, "So technically, he let the lorry come in." "Well, technically he did, and we're here, aren't we?" There was no arguing against this. "First, though, we have to go through customs and then get our passports stamped," he said. At the counter they waited. As luck would have it, the passport officer came in and told the customs officer that he had finished his shift. He gave them a polite nod before he left. They were obviously doing the right thing. Brian showed the paperwork for the 80 cases, and the customs officer asked if they had an import license. "All the paperwork's in the lorry," said Brian. He pointed to the lorry. "What about the goods? All second hand?" The customs man asked. "Yes." "Okay," was the reply. And the customs officer stamped the passports. Brian breathed a sigh of relief. They went over to the passport booth, with the children tagging along, and showed the passports and the paperwork to the new duty officer. "Where are the boxes?" he asked. They pointed to the lorry. He handed over the passports and the papers, and the kids got another smile. "If you're stopped by the authorities on the road," he said, "you'll have to show all the paperwork for the lorry and the goods." Brian could never work out whether the new duty officer knew that the lorry should not have been in Portugal. He later discovered something about this country. Paperwork is always a problem, but if there's a way to get round the red tape, you can try. And if you're a young couple flanked by kids, and if you've shown you respect the system, and if you're prepared to take responsibility for any difficulties you may have with others in authority, the paperwork will not get in the way of a human attitude towards solving the problem. The couple didn't go to Lisbon there and then. They waited until darkness fell and set off. Brian thought, "Now we're here, all together, and it's my family that matters most to me."